Hi, I'm Nat.
And I'm Guy. And Jimmy Kimmel, it looks like he's back. We thought he got fired. Perhaps not. It looks like Disney's bringing him back. We do have some action you can take and some phone numbers you can call if you don't like the fact that he's back. Let's get into it with the X.
So, from Nick Sortor, alert! Just because Disney is reinstating Jimmy Kimmel does not mean ABC affiliates have to air his show. Nexstar and Sinclair own a combined 63 ABC stations. They do not have to air his show. Get Loud text at NXST Media Group and Sinclair to keep Kimmel off air. To call Nexstar, you can call 972-373-8800. To call Sinclair, you can call 410 568-1500.
And that's a 1 before those numbers because you probably live out of state. That being said, the affiliates do not have to air Jimmy Kimmel. The big Disney likes to air it on the coast. It does well because there's a lot of liberals, but in these other districts, Jimmy Kimmel has never done well. He doesn't bring on conservative guests. That being said, I'm actually somewhat glad they brought him back. Why? Because I am pro free speech, and we didn't report it, but I did learn that the FCC chair did step in and said we can do this the easy way or the hard way. That kind of infers to me the government was kind of stepping on free speech. I know you disagree. Why don't you give your opinion, and then I'll come back with mine.
Well, the only thing the FCC Chair Brendan Carr said during Benny Johnson's show on a random podcast, was exactly that, but it has been made clear that it was not any kind of government intervention that went through. It was actually, once again, the affiliates from all these different states and from Nexstar and Sinclair that were saying, no, we want to be able to not play it, and we want to bring them down because our advertisers are telling us we don't want to advertise on that.
Okay, but let's also make this clear. Sinclair is looking to have a merger. They need the FCC chair to approve that. Therefore, if there is any ripples in the water, so I can see how that can not only be misconstrued, but Jimmy Kimmel could possibly have a multi-million-dollar lawsuit here. That's why I think Disney did bring him back. That being said, I don't like what Jimmy Kimmel said, but I don't want to see free speech stepped on. I know when the left was in power, they did step all over free speech, not just canceling people online, but also giving tens of thousands of dollars worth of fines, canceling people's bank accounts, and throwing them into jail for hate speech. This still goes on all around the world, such as in the EU, the UK, Canada, where we're originally from. We actually moved from Canada to Mexico City because the government has just gone absolutely insane in Canada.
And because I'm a Mexican.
What else do you got to say about this?
Well, I mean, Jimmy Kimmel did get back. We just found this out today from the BBC Jimmy Kimmel Show to return after suspension over Charlie Kirk comments. And I mean, I did say from the suspension when we were kind of bouncing up and down and saying, good, number one, because his ratings were not good. He was getting around 120,000 in the key demographics, which means the people that actually buy things from the advertisers. And I said, I don't know how long this suspension is going to last, and if it's only 1 week, then I'm going to get mad once again at Disney, as a lot of conservatives are doing, because this didn't mean anything. Jimmy Kimmel threw a tantrum. People wore shirts that say Jimmy Kimmel back. And now, magically, he's back. They're saying he's going to address the things on his next show on Tuesday, which will be this Tuesday.
Well, he originally didn't want to not only apologize, he wanted to double down. And some of the writers from the writer's room actually came in and warned the higher-ups. The higher-ups then canceled his show temporarily. It looks like they wanted him to give a public apology. He's refusing to do it. So it's going to be very interesting. Number one, what happens on Tuesday? But number two, does he double down? He's going to probably stay political. I'm guessing after this big controversy, yes, his ratings were low before, but liberals may rally around him to support him. That being said, the affiliates that are in red states and red districts are not going to tune into Jimmy Kimmel. They never have. So the affiliates may not air Jimmy Kimmel going forward based upon those numbers we gave you in the beginning of the show. You can call them if you do kind of want to make an impact. I don't think I would personally do it. I think freedom of speech is an important thing, and we do need to hear from both sides, even though the left didn't have the same respect for the right over the last decade.
Well, the problem with hearing both sides is that Jimmy Kimmel never brought on the other side. And once again, it was not because he wasn't suspended because he wasn't fired. He wasn't suspended over just, saying a joke that was an off-color joke. He actually lied during and pretending to be a news entertainment kind of show. So the FCC and the affiliates are at complete, they can totally cancel him if they want because of the misinformation he was given.
Well, we'll see, because when they wanted to fire Colbert, they did it without a problem because the FCC chair didn't give any statement, so it wouldn't necessarily open Disney up to a lawsuit from Colbert. But with Kimmel, I think they're now open up and exposed to a potential lawsuit if they do let Jimmy Kimmel go. His contract is running out soon, so they may just let him run it out.
I don't think they're up for a lawsuit because, once again, it is clear, and through the paper trail even, it is clear, and from the even articles that the left-wing media wrote, they've made it clear it was not the decision of the FCC. The FCC had actually nothing to do with it. It was the ABC executives and the executives at Disney that, after asking Kimmel to apologize, after he didn't and he said he wanted to double down, they said, okay, well, maybe we have to pull him off air, at least for now.
Well, we can agree to disagree, but I do remember a time when YouTube was taking people off the air, independent content creators on the right. The next step would naturally be to put pressure on YouTube and see content creators get banned off of YouTube. I don't want to see that era again. I prefer to have free speech. Just let them stay on the air. There is a difference with Jimmy Kimmel because ABC, NBC, and CBS have 3 specialty licenses in the United States that they have to basically put both opinions on air, and they haven't been doing that over the last decade. So I do understand why conservatives are upset here. That being said, I am very pro free speech, and although I was very angry when about what Jimmy Kimmel said, and originally I somewhat justified it by saying private employers can do what they want, which I still understand they can. I think there does need to be some more legal protections from private employers.
But let's get into the article. So Jimmy Kimmel's show to return after suspension over Charlie Kirk comments from the BBC. U.S. comedian, that's in big quotes, Jimmy Kimmel will return to his late night talk show on Tuesday, only a week, after he was suspended for making jokes related to the death of conservative influencer, the assassination of conservative influencer Charlie Kirk. Disney, which owns the U.S. broadcast network that airs Jimmy Kimmel Live, said on Monday that it suspended the show because it felt some of the comments were ill-timed and thus insensitive. We have spent the last days having thoughtful conversations with Jimmy, and after those conversations have reached the decision to return the show on Tuesday. So they were pretty short conversations.
And I also think this is the last opportunity for Jimmy Kimmel because he is going to have liberals rally behind him. His ratings should spike somewhat, but if he can't keep his ratings up, it's going to be in trouble. The best way to keep his ratings up would actually to be invite conservatives on his show and actually have some debate, much like Piers Morgan has on his show on YouTube.
They can't do that.
Oh, possibly.
The comic's abrupt suspension came after threats by the federal TV regulator to revoke ABC's broadcast license, sparking nationwide debates over free speech. But he didn't.
But it's less about revoking their license and more about the merger that they're looking to do. And this is why a lot of these Trump lawsuits are being settled out of court, because a lot of these companies like Disney have assets in a lot of different media places, and there is a ripple effect where if you upset the government here, they might punish you over here. So especially with this merger coming up, they don't want to ruffle the FCC chair's feathers.
I mean, maybe, but I still think that the whole trying to make it about being the FCC and being the government trying to censor him. No, he could have stayed on if they wanted to. The affiliates were the ones that said, we don't want that because our advertisers are calling and saying, hey, a bunch of the people that we know are angry about the comments and don't think that advertising on his show would be a good idea. And then, funnily enough, the FCC said it as this was already happening. Like, the affiliates were already getting calls from the advertisers to say, we don't want to be on Kimmel and we want you to suspend it. But
you can understand if there is a merger coming up, how this could affect the merger, right?
Sure.
You're not completely ignorant to that fact. And I will say this is why we did give the number at the beginning of the show, even though I'm not personally going to call. I do know some people don't want Jimmy Kimmel on the air in their district, so they can call and make their voice heard.
For me, it's also more about the fact that they were trying to almost equivalent the fact that Jimmy Kimmel got suspended for just 1 week with the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Like, they were trying to make it seem as it was this exact same thing, and as they cared so much about free speech. When we see them lie time and time again, and we also see how, and I mean, it's pretty well known how the news fabricates and is able to twist around things. So Jimmy Kimmel, his staff, anybody that was writing that joke, because I'm sure it was not Jimmy Kimmel, were able to go watch the conference that they gave from the Utah sheriff and the prosecutors that were saying, hey, we know that he is left aligned. There's all this evidence. We have the evidence on the bullets, the inscriptions. That is all pretty obvious leftist, not even far left, but leftist rhetoric. And most people were already commenting on it by the time he made those comments. So he was willingly and on purpose misleading the public with the statements he gave. So if he's pretending to be a news outlet of some sort, even if it is entertainment and jokes, then the FCC can say, hey, you're misleading the public. This goes against regulations, especially if you want to pretend that you're at least half a news outlet.
Yeah, and I do agree with all that, but also free speech is of paramount importance to me, and I need somebody to step far over the line and not this little thing that Jimmy Kimmel did here. So it would have to be very much more clear to me anyway. Free speech is of primary importance, and I want to keep the dialogue open between both sides. I think the left is going to have to come to the table now and start debating. If we start canceling them and censoring them and saying we're not going to platform you, we're no better than they were when they were in power over the last decade.
No, I'm not saying to cancel them, censor them, and once again, for the whole channel, free speech is important and paramount. It's one of our foundational values, and just in general why we had to move, what we saw happening in Canada. But at the same time, I do find it hypocritical that the right always has to treat these people with tweezers after they throw their little tantrums like they're 5, saying, oh no, it's the same as Charlie Kirk getting assassinated. His voice got cut, now they're trying to cut Jimmy Kimmel's off. It's not the same thing. I'm tired of treating these people with tweezers because they keep getting away with it.
But we don't have to treat them with tweezers. They no longer own all these platforms. A matter of fact, most of these platforms have switched over to the right, which I'm very happy for, because the right is not implementing an outsized voice for right-wing commentators. It's more moderate now that it's on the right. Twitter used to be owned by liberals. It's now owned by Elon Musk. The new TikTok is going to be owned by Larry Ellison and Fox News. Fox News is also not being deplatformed. There is a ton of... Also, Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook. He goes with whoever's in power. Trump happens to be in power right now. I think free speech is safe now on the right and for conservatives. So I don't see it necessary to absolutely start banning people and trying to take their jobs. But that's just me.
But also one other thing that annoys me specifically about Jimmy Kimmel is that the only reason he was able to get past all the controversies, let's not forget what kind of face he put on one time and the way he used to behave on the Man Show, which would have gotten and did get a lot of other comedians and people, if not canceled, I mean, ostracized from the general public's view. So let's see a clip that I'm sure Kimmel doesn't want.
Well, and I actually used to be a Kimmel fan, and I did used to watch him on the Man Show. That being said, I think they have him by the absolute balls here. The left-wing media knows they can cancel him at any time by just having a barrage of clips kind of reemerge. Let's maybe be the first to reemerge these clips and see what he used to do.
There's an old clip. This is from Brandon. An old clip is trending from the Man Show showing Jimmy Kimmel doing this. The only reason Jimmy never got canceled is because he bowed down to the Democratic machine and served as a propaganda arm almost for them, especially during the dark times of 2020. But let's see how he used to behave. And I'm not putting the sound on because there's a song that goes over it. But I mean, anybody who would have canceled that, called misogynist, this is, I would say, way worse than what Trump even said on that bus on the hot mic.
I think this is hilarious, and I like stuff like this.
Again, most people would, but the fact that they're trying to make it seem like he's this virtuous person who canceled and his free speech and blah, 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 is kind of infuriating to me.
Yeah, and this is why I say he is such a propagandist now. That being said, Colbert and him are really late night propagandists. The only late night host to really bring on conservative voices has been Jimmy Fallon. I'm not saying he's a ton better, but he's not on the same level of propaganda. He actually...
And Bill Maher.
Well, Bill Maher as well, but Bill Maher's not on late night anymore. He now has his own show, correct?
Well, he's on HBO, which I guess is separate from public.
What I was going to say about Fallon, though, he actually brought on Greg Gutfeld. So that does show some, at least, ability to bring on conservative voices. And like I said, ABC, NBC, and CBS have specialty licenses where they should be bringing on both sides, but they're not.
Well, it's not that they should, as in they are required by, because they're not allowed to show a bias if they're reporting on news.
No, or not just that.
From the FCC itself.
Yeah, but they have to do a basic public good, and a lot of the sub context within their contract requires them to kind of show both sides. Okay.
But just to finish, let's see the opinion of Elon Musk that he retweeted, which I completely agree, from Ted Nugent. He just put 3 little dots there, but it says, imagine being more upset about a canceled TV show than a political assassination and still thinking you're a decent human being. And I completely agree.
Well, I will kind of end this segment on this, and that is, if Erika Kirk can forgive the assassin, I can forgive Jimmy Kimmel and give him another chance.
I just don't think he deserves one.
And I know you don't. So I think free speech, it's very important for the right wing to kind of have the higher ground here and open up that dialogue. Platform people from the other side right now. It's the best way to go forward. And I think the right wing has the best arguments, so they should win those arguments.
Sure.
Okay, let's go into the next segment here. And what is it?
Hold on. So while we're in this interlude, we are trying to stream to X. I guess let us know if you're watching us there, or if you want to go watch us there. That's where we are as well. I believe you can also chat to us through X if you want.
Yeah, this is our first time actually being on X.
Yes,
so.
On X, like with the show. We're usually on YouTube. You can go subscribe there or go follow us on X. We're also on RUMBLE, and the last little bit of the show will just be on RUMBLE and X, because YouTube doesn't like us to talk about certain things.
Yeah, there was a censorship issue when we first started this channel in Canada. So in case something happens like that again, we're trying to have alternative platforms like Rumble and X. So the second half of the show will be exclusively on those 2 platforms. Okay. Let's go into the next story. Sure. And why don't you introduce it?
Sure. This past Sunday was Charlie Kirk's memorial in Arizona, and while there were many moving speeches, and some of them made me at least tear up, the one that actually got us both, and I think was the most important just in general for not just the US, but the whole world, was Erika Kirk, Charlie Kirk's wife's speech, and the amazing act she did while she was giving the speech.
Well, we did broadcast the entire thing 5 hours, and a French media station tried to take it down globally. Luckily, we were able to repost it, but it just shows how the mainstream media did not want that reach to get out of that event. Also, that being said, well, why don't we go right into the clip here?
Yeah, so Erika Kirk, Charlie Kirk's widow, says she forgives the man accused of murder, wife of activist killed in Utah allegedly by Tyler Robinson, and that's the way it has to be said for now. Says, I forgive him because it was what Christ did.
Well, and that speech was absolutely moving. A lot of speeches there were moving. Hers was head and toes above everybody else. I think we have a new major political figure in the conservative Christian movement. Let's read a little bit about it.
Okay. During an emotional address at his public memorial in Glendale, Arizona, the widow of right-wing youth organizer Charlie Kirk said she forgives the man charged with killing her husband. My husband, he wanted to save young men, just like the one who took his life, Erika Kirk said before an at-capacity crowd. That man, that young man, I forgive him because it was what Christ did, and it is what Charlie would do. Those in the stadium rose to their feet in applause, and I believe it was one of the longest standing applauses, not just there, but in a long time. And also the attendance for the memorial itself had more than a lot of political figures have had, and even more numbers than Elvis Presley or Muhammad Ali, for example.
Well, I will say, I'm not a very emotional person. She gave most of her speech, and I was normal for it. But when she did forgive the shooter of her husband, it did catch me, and I may have dropped a tear or almost dropped a tear on stream when that happened. You were absolutely
yes, I couldn't
bawling.
hold it back. You can go find it. But I mean, I get it touched everybody. I mean, every single person that was watching or that saw it afterwards. And it just shows the complete difference between, I mean, if we want to do a difference between Jimmy Kimmel, for example, who represents the left, and Erika Kirk, who now is one of the biggest representatives on the right, we can see what Kimmel was doing. He didn't want to forgive. He didn't want to even apologize. And Erika Kirk is forgiving her husband's shooter, and it hasn't even been 2 full weeks. He hasn't even been interred yet.
Yeah, I was going to say something, but I forgot. Why don't you just continue on with the article then?
Well, let's see what she actually said. And once again, I cry every time I see it, so sorry about that. From Rapid Response 47, if you watch one thing today, let it be this: the truly remarkable display of grace and compassion. And I agree.
Oh, I was going to say one more thing. When we were live streaming that event, some people were asking us, do we expect to see any Democrats there? I actually did expect to see a couple. There was not a single one, or at least I'm yet to get news of a single one going to the event. I think it would have been huge for a Democrat to kind of reach across the aisle on this particular moment. I'm absolutely shocked they didn't. There was only one that kind of came out, and that was Van Jones, because he had a text message conversation with Charlie Kirk just before he died, where he wanted to actually have a debate and a talk with him.
Well, Charlie Kirk wanted to. Yeah. Van Jones didn't get to respond to it. And I did watch Megyn Kelly today talk about it, because she used to work with Van Jones, and she is not as glad and happy that he did that, because he just seems to be using it as a way to get his name out and as a way to get people to talk about him, and his sincerity, not just with that, but with other things that he has said he's going to do or wanted to do. But I think talking about Erika Kirk is a lot more important than talking about Van Jones. And I also don't think Turning Point or the people organizing the event really wanted any Democrat figures there. I wouldn't.
I don't know about that. And I do think it is important to talk about Van Jones and what the other side of the aisle is. We are highlighting the worst of the other side of the aisle. So sometimes it is important to highlight the best of what the other side of the aisle does. And
the thing is, it's very difficult to find what the best of the other side of the aisle
that's
does.
why I'm mentioning Van Jones. He was the best side of that aisle. So even if it's not the best, it's the best that they have to offer at this moment.
But I think the perspective that Megyn Kelly gave and the background she gave to his statement.
You're much more right-wing Nazi than I am, but
we can't say that word on stream.
We just did.
And you're just equivalating me the same way the left does to everybody else. So thank you for that.
Okay.
But again, let's go back to the actual important story and the important clip. If you watch one thing today, let it be this: the truly remarkable display of grace and compassion from Mrs. Erika Kirk as she forgives her husband's assassin, because that's what Christ would do. We love you, Erika. And I think it was still the most important thing to watch today.
No, I actually thought the most important speech wasn't Erika Kirk. It was the best speech, but I'll talk about the most important that happened after this.
That young man on the cross, our Savior said, "Father, forgive them, for they not know what they do." That man, that young man, I forgive him.
I think that was it.
Let's just play it on.
Okay, and that was the clip.
I forgive him because it was what Christ did and is what Charlie would do. The answer to hate is not hate. The answer we know from the gospel is love, and always love. Love for our enemies and love for those who persecute us.
That's why I wanted to leave it up, because the second bit is also one of the most important ones, because we have seen several reactions to this speech from the left and the right, but specifically from the left, calling Erika Kirk a terrible actress, saying that she didn't mean it. And I just think that that is despicable. And it's not just coming from crazy people online. It's coming from pundits and people on TV and on stream saying those things.
Yeah.
And I think it's them that don't want to bring down the temperature or even listen to the message of Christian forgiveness.
Yeah, and we're going to get into that with a few articles coming up. And that was by far the most powerful moment there. There were a lot of powerful moments, but I think the most important speech was the most lackluster and unimportant, and that was from Donald Trump. He started well, he ended well, but he spoke for a long time, and it sounded like a political speech. Like he was running for re-election. He's not running for a re-election anymore. And actually, half the stadium started emptying out when he was speaking. Why is that the most important? Not because I don't like Donald Trump. I like Donald Trump for a long time, and I still do. But the movement has consolidated now and is currently moving beyond Donald Trump. We realize J.D. Vance is most likely the next person to step up. We have people like Erika Kirk. We have the Turning Point movement. We have a lot of online debaters debating what are the best points of conservatism and of Christianity. That being said, it is good to see that the movement is actually moving beyond Donald Trump now, because the left seems to think this is a movement that dies with Trump, and it's not. And you could see that with Trump's speech, I think.
But also with yesterday being essentially a revival and just a reminder of a lot of the values that America has lost and has made it get to the point to where it is, and that it includes not just America, but a lot of the West have lost these values. And I think a lot of people, not just after Charlie Kirk's assassination, but especially during these past weeks since then, and especially yesterday during the memorial, a lot of people started to realize what's actually good and what's bad, what's actual truth and what's not, what's invented truth or the truth that most people want to or had wanted to believe in, and that the kindness and empathetic side is not actually that, and the kind and empathetic side might be the one that they've been besmirching for the longest time.
Well, and I've said this a few times on our podcast. I might not be Christian, but I do believe in a non-moving Christian moral values, because it is non-moving. It sits guardrails on politics and on society. And even I might not be religious, but I think that is really the best foundation for not only politics, but society in general. So I think there is a potential group of people that are non-Christians that can realize maybe we do need religion. There is a space for religion to sit a moral boundary that doesn't move. The less moral boundary constantly moves. They don't even know what their morals are. They constantly shift from year to year. One year they'll be anti-war. The next year they want to go to war with Russia, China, and whoever else they think they can consolidate power with. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of there not being any really strong moral foundation that doesn't move. And even though I might not agree with everything, I do think it is a good framework, and it is a proven framework that has worked for thousands of years. So I did like to see the rise of Christianity and conservatism merging here.
And same with me. I'm always speaking about how I'm not religious, especially on my Spanish show, but how I defend faith and defend religion in the West, because we have seen the effects of what has happened since we decided it's not important anymore, and we forgot that that is where a lot of our laws and principles as societies come from specifically. And the fact that they have been forgotten, and now torching down churches, more than 500 in the entire West, but I'm sure the number is even bigger, just shows where we are. And then we see things like this, and then we see also the reaction, and it's easy to understand why and where it's coming from.
Yeah. Okay, let's go into
let's see what the New York Times had to say about the Charlie Kirk service from the New York Times.
And 1 second, they noticed the same thing we did. They just think it's a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing, and I am a non-Christian. And non-Christians can think Christianity is good, and it does give a good moral foundation. They just think anybody that's a non-Christian won't have or won't consider Christian beliefs to be a good thing, but they are.
Or defend them.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, the operative word. At Kirk's service, an extraordinary fusion of government and Christianity, and that terrifies everybody. The memorial reflected the degree to which conservative Christianity has melded with Republican politics in the Trump era, and it's not just in the Trump era, it's the way the founding fathers essentially made it all the way back then, and a lot of the things that were put into the Constitution were coming from that same moral set of values.
Well,
that is unmoving.
We've gone through 10 years of crazy liberal nonsense of there are 62 genders and everything else they want to say. I'm more than happy to have Christian moral values to put guardrails on politics and the rest of society so we can have a unifying identity. Even if you're non-Christian, you can agree with a lot of things Christianity does say, and it does give a group identity and a consolidation so we don't go to war, so we don't have civil war, so we can kind of look past and forgive our enemies like she had just said in that speech.
But then again, it doesn't mean a theocracy. And the fact that they're jumping all the way to that is because their own ideology has become a sort of theocracy within their government and their media and everything that has been fed to the public, not just in the US, for the past 15 plus years.
Yeah, they think it's top-down morals. They think they are God. The left thinks their moral compass comes from the top down from their politicians, and year to year or subject to subject matter, they can be in direct contradiction with each other, and they can't explain it. We need a firm moral foundation that's not going to move.
Mm-hmm. So let's just read a little bit and see how they're framing it. Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, paid tribute to Charlie Kirk by citing the gospel message, and most of the speakers did actually.
I think every single one did.
Yeah, by citing the gospel message of the death and resurrection of Jesus. Stephen Miller, oh yeah, so they're going through all of them. A deputy White House chief of staff envisioned a spiritual uprising in Mr. Kirk's wake. VP J.D. Vance said Mr. Kirk's influence had reshaped the balance of American politics and traced it back to Mr. Kirk's faith. Because of Mr. Kirk, he said, I have talked more about Jesus Christ in the past 2 weeks than I have in my entire time in public office. At the memorial service of Mr. Kirk on Sunday in a packed football stadium in suburban Phoenix, the highest levels of U.S. government and evangelical worship were woven as one. Perhaps never before at such a grand scale had such a fusion taken hold in a public display, more than just a tribute in the style of Mr. Kirk's evangelical tradition. The service represented a pinnacle event reflecting the degree to which conservative Christianity had melded with the Republican politics in the Trump era.
Yeah, and I think it's a very important place for maybe people that aren't Christians or aren't true believers to come forward and say it's okay to have Christian values, and it might be a good thing for society, because I think there is a big group of people coming up in the midterms and in the next election that aren't going to be Christians but can realize that Christian moral values are the best set of moral values for society, and they should work in tandem with government. Separate, but it puts guardrails on politics, and it says, you know, there are two genders. Family is the good thing.
And while it seems like the New York Times was just noticing the fact that, I mean, the name of Jesus Christ and the gospel was spoken about multiple times during the memorial and during the service, and by most, if not all, speakers, we have one of the old or ex-preeminent speakers on the left coming out with a barrage of insults and very worried.
Well,
apparently,
and I do think this is a long clip, so let's play it at 1.5 speed because it's a 5-minute clip.
But from Colin Rugg, he says, new Don Lemon fumes over the Christian messaging at Charlie Kirk's memorial, says speakers quoted scripture because they were demanding submission. And that's the thing, like...
Nobody's demanding submission. I'm a non-Christian, and I don't think they were demanding submission at all. I actually agree with a lot of the moral foundations, or most of the moral foundations they are putting forth. I think society should go back to something like that.
And if anything, I would say it was a welcoming of people into the faith if they wanted to go that way, but they weren't forcing anybody to do it, as they forced everybody with their ideologies to agree with them. And if you don't, you get censored, canceled, fired, etc. He says what we saw in that arena was not simply faith-finding public
play
expression.
It's going to be 5 minutes, and he's going to say all this here.
Okay, so let me see if I can play it at 2 times or 1.5.
1.5 is good.
Yeah, because at 2 times I can never understand it. Really don't want to watch this.
And he starts off slow, but once he gets into it, he really gets into it, and he really hates Christianity.
And after his show, he doesn't have much other than doing this.
And these are the things that they said Charlie Kirk stood for. He was a man of faith. And the reason that struck me so is because I got a text from a friend who said, I am a black woman. The person who babysits my child is a black woman from Jamaica. And she says, Charlie Kirk was a person of faith. And I say to them, okay, so what does that mean, a person of faith? How does a person of faith act? How does a person who really believes in what God and the scriptures say, the true meaning of it, not the distorted meaning, how would they treat the least of these? So what I say now is that what happened in Arizona this weekend was not just a memorial, it was something else entirely. People will tell you that it is about grief. It was about grief, about honoring a man's life, about faith. And on the surface, maybe it looked like that.
Pause it.
Tens of
Yeah, more than just the surface, all the way through it was that. And what he just said is one of their Jamaican people that they knew were saying he was a man of faith. Christianity really does unite all races. And that's the thing that scares the left so much. They work so hard to divide everybody into society and to try to give everything every little group wants rather than have one unifying message and what's good for the country, a unifying American identity.
Mm-hmm.
Of thousands gathered. The music swelled. I'm sure some of you saw it. I just saw some of the sound bites. There were prayers and tears and moments of silence. But if you stayed long enough for the little bit that I could stay, and then I said, you know what, I'm out. If you listen long enough and close enough, if you stayed long enough and you listen close enough, you could feel the ground shifting beneath you, because that wasn't just about a man who died. This was about a movement claiming divine permission to rule. Can I get a witness? And all of the sound bites and the words used.
Yeah, and I witnessed it all. We were on stream for a 5-hour stream. We've seen the whole thing. He's the one that is admitting he's only watched the sound bites, and he wants to construe it the way he wants to construe it.
And you can just tell how
there is a place
scared he is
for everybody, with not only the conservative, but the Christian movement as well. Like I said, I am a non-Christian, yet I think those values are very important.
We'll reveal to you exactly what I said. It was a revival meeting wrapped in a memorial. I'm from the South. Southern Baptist, went to Catholic school. You know what a revival meeting is, right? That is the holiest of holy rollers having a revival. Let the church say amen. It was a revival meeting wrapped in a memorial, a political rally dressed as church. And by the end of the night, it was clear this was not only about Charlie Kirk's death. It was about his afterlife in politics. Donald Trump stood on the stage like a man at the center of a prophecy. He called Charlie Kirk a martyr. Other politicians promised to carry out his mission. The crowd cheered as if the passing of the man had lit some sort of sacred fire.
It did.
And that's also what they're scared about, because it did, and his memory will now live on, and we're just seeing it happen now, but with Erika Kirk at the forefront and CEO of Turning Point USA, but also with this very important political figure being assassinated, his name will be carried through for way longer than if they had just let him continue speaking. And that scares them even more, to see what the effect of of the left's ideology assassinating Charlie Kirk is.
I'll also address the elephant in the room here. I understand Don Lemon is gay, and maybe that's why he is so anti-Christian. I will say this. I don't think there's anything wrong with being gay, and if he wants to be gay or anybody else wants to, but that's not the messaging we need to put forth as a society. There needs to be family first, people that can replicate society to grow and flourish. So if somebody's gay, yes, that's okay, but what we put forth in movies, music, and everything else, that should not be the primary messaging. The primary messaging should be man and woman for family, so the society can continue on. And that's what we have to realize. It's not that something's necessarily wrong with being gay, but we should not put that forth as the main tenet of society.
Well, and the thing is, that message has been the main one for the longest time. So the other messaging, or the other examples of a happy family, are not even allowed almost in movies and TV anymore.
To me, this was not mourning. This was a mobilization.
And it was.
And here's where we have to tell the truth here. What we saw in that arena was not simply faith-finding public expression. It was religious nationalism on full display. That is the truth. That is my truth. This is my freedom of expression. This is my First Amendment right to be able to tell you the truth from my point of view. Not just from my point of view. This is what it is. The language was unmistakable. Take the nation back for God. Restore America's covenant. This is a holy calling. That's what it sounded like.
One thing he didn't notice he did there, and that basically shapes the whole way, or in my opinion, shapes the whole way that they think, is that this is my truth, this is what I think. But no, it is actually the truth. So they're always saying that what they think and the way they see the world is the truth, while they ignore the actual foundational and real truth.
This is not the language of democracy. This is the language of domination. Because I feel, many people, when I wrote this book, said, I had no idea that you were a person of faith, that you had such strong belief in the Almighty. And I say, because faith is a private matter. It comforts, it convicts, it calls us to humility. But when faith fuses with power, it begins to ask for something else. It asks for obedience. It divides the country into the saved and the damned.
But what kind of obedience does religion, if it melds within society or within politics, does it ask? Most of the obedience it asks for is to just continue the tenets of humility of, etc., but for all of society, not just for the ones that practice it.
What shapes our law and our society and even our science has been Christianity and religion, and the left has seemed to have forgotten that was the foundation the society was built upon. Even for non-Christians, it has built and it has been proven to build the best society. And you don't have to agree with it. And I'm a non-Christian, yet I'm willing to vote for it. And that's what they're so bloody scared of, because this is a democracy. And if religious people no longer fear to bring religion into the forefront and people actually agree with it that might be non-religious, then they're going to win.
But for example, I do agree, because you said vote for it. I agree there shouldn't be religion and government mixed together. I think that actually puts at risk both government and religion.
And I think you're wrong. And you have to be wrong, because what's going to influence the laws that we put into effect?
No,
Religion.
I'm saying people in politics should be more forefront and speak about, as they did this past Sunday, their religion and where their values and morals come from. But I don't think government, as in a theocracy, should be created. And that is very dangerous, both for religion, because it can be controlled by government, and for government, because it can be controlled by religion.
And we can agree.
Both have to be separate. And I'm not going to agree to disagree, because
I'm not agreeing to
we've
disagree.
already seen dangers from theocracies.
No, what you don't seem to understand is I'm not suggesting they merge. What I'm suggesting is one influences the other and they stay separate. And that is very important. Otherwise, you're going to have you're going to have radical laws. There's 62 genders and everything else. If you allow religion to influence politics, there are 2 genders.
Yes, but that's what I said. I said they should be able to influence, and people within politics should be able to speak freely about their religion and not be afraid of what society will say.
That's the melding of Christianity and politics. It doesn't necessarily have to be right in the same realm.
Or at least be an alternative too.
I think one should influence the other. And I think the left has tried very hard to make Christianity no longer influence politics. And if Christians start voting in Christian candidates, then it will have a heavy influence on laws and other things within the society.
Well, and it's not just they haven't let Christian politicians be elected, but it's that they've, been determined to destroy the fact that they could even run.
Well, and I think even between me and you, you're seeing the divide and what's going to happen on the right, and it's going to be conservatism and Christian nationalism. That being said, they are going to vote for the same candidate, so there's still a unifying front. Okay, let's continue to go here.
It's almost done.
Donlin is getting me going.
And the condemned. It turns opponents into enemies of God. And when politicians wrap themselves in scripture, they are not calling us to virtue. They are demanding submission. That is why this matters. It matters to me. That's why it should matter to you and to everyone. You have to see beyond the illusion. You have to remove the filter of ideology from your eyes and your spirit.
He hasn't removed it.
If you remove religion from society, you're going to have 62 genders and all kinds of other things that just aren't really acceptable in a unifying identity in religion. And that's what he wants. And that's what a lot of liberals want. That's why liberal ideology comes from the top down, from the politician, in order to consolidate power within politics. When you have religion and politics separate, but having one influence the other, it really puts guardrails on politics.
But that's also, I think, why they're so scared, because they see their own ideologies crumbling under their own weight and their own nonsensical, and the fact that they change all the time. There's no grounding moral foundation to what they think and what they believe and what they espouse, so it can always be changed. And that's what scares them the most, I think, that people can disagree with them because there's nothing laid out and grounded within what they ask you to believe and ask you to enact and legislate.
Well, they want a amorphous, non-confining blob to be their moral foundation. So there is no foundation. It just moves with whatever the politicians tell you. And that's unacceptable, because you can start wars on that or anything else. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I think that's it for that segment there.
Yes. So, again, they're scared, and they're starting to call it Christian nationalism, as if it were something very dangerous or horrible for society. But accepting also the fact that even if you're non-religious, even if you're an atheist, the laws that you follow and the countries that you live in, if you're in the West, do have that moral foundation, and it has been forgotten for so long, which has allowed the disaster that we see nowadays on both sides, I would say.
Yeah, politics needs a foundation again that's separate from itself, and religion provides a proven good foundation. So I welcome Christianity back into politics, even though I am not a Christian.
But not a theocracy.
Okay.
Let me just read.
You read. I'm going to stop all the recordings, and then we'll continue on with the other segments.
Sure. So Apollo 007, I always try to say your name in Spanish because I'm used to saying it in Spanish, says, "Hello, Nat and Guy. Disney decided to return the show to its regular time slot. It seems Disney likes to waste its money." And that's the thing. I mean, maybe they're just bringing him back on so he can apologize publicly, and then they'll cut him off because they have seen the numbers being thrown back in their faces and people saying, I mean, come on, he wasn't doing so well in any demos, basically.
And maybe if you didn't miss in our opening segment, and I'll just state it for anybody that did miss, right off the top of the show, we read an X account that had the phone numbers for the affiliates. So you can actually call and say you don't want to see Jimmy Kimmel in your area. So ABC actually knows not to air it in certain districts. It's going to air on the coast because there's a lot of people that may agree with that. But in the middle of the country, he has low ratings, and the affiliates may not play them if there's enough of a voice there. So.
And Walker says, incredible act of courage by Charlie's wife in forgiving that evil man. And yes, I
completely agree.
I agree with that too. And I do think the fact that this left is still trying to make and vilify it is ridiculous. Like, they're just showing themselves for who they are more and more. Especially the pundits and the people that have either microphones or a TV or are on TV or on X or writing, etc.
Well, and I think I said this during our stream when we were doing the Kirk Memorial, but we were watching like a 3-hour think tank of liberals with like 8 liberals, and I do on a regular basis, and they are constantly talking how they're going to win elections. What policies should we have? They have no real foundation to stand on, and like. It's nice to see a real foundation with real moral standards that you can build a society on. Mm-hmm. So,
and Rafa says, hello, Rafa. And he also says, did you see what Trump said about the Amish and the vax?
Oh,
you didn't add that story, but we did see.
No, I didn't see that. I'm always up on the Amish stories, and I'll always put them front and center. You didn't see
his statement?
No, I didn't see it.
His statement he came out with today talked about Tylenol, autism, blah, blah, blah.
No, I didn't see it.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought you had gathered. I thought you were admitting this. You hadn't added the story because.
We actually went on air with too many stories today, so we had to take a bunch off. Most of the stories I gathered were actually from the weekend. Mm-hmm. Okay. So.
Do you want to go to that story?
Yeah, let's go right to it.
It was one of the biggest ones.
Yeah, let's go to that story. I was actually waiting for that because I remember he said something about it, but I forgot to look it up.
But yes, of course, from the AP, and this is the way most media outlets have been framing it since he gave the speech or spoke about it today. Trump makes unfounded claims about Tylenol and repeats discredited link between vaxes and autism.
Well, no, that's not the case because I have seen a lot of the data coming out of this. RFK has put this front and center, and Tylenol has a huge link because since there were vaccines, the rate of autism has gone way, way, way up, except in one country, and that was Cuba. Cuba didn't have the same rates as autism, and the only difference between the United States and Cuba was that when the vaccines were given, people would have symptoms like headaches and stuff. So doctors would prescribe Tylenol at a very young age to kind of mitigate the symptoms, where in Cuba, they didn't prescribe Tylenol because they thought it was a good thing that the kid was having a headache and other things because it meant the vaccine was working.
Let's see how the AP frames it, and then let's see what he actually said. President Donald Trump on Monday used the platform of the presidency to promote unproven and in some cases discredited ties between Tylenol. They just came out with this study. That's what they were talking about. Oh
yeah, God. These are not discredited studies. I knew a lot about this because I follow RFK really close. So
vaccines and autism, and as his administration announced a wide-ranging effort to study the causes of complex brain disorder. Once again, they're saying they want to study it more. don't take Tylenol, Trump instructed pregnant women. And I mean, it's not that hard not to take Tylenol. And there are other alternatives if you're pregnant. And the fact that this has been advice given by doctors, maybe let's find out what happens if pregnant women don't take Tylenol and maybe take an alternative, or just maybe suffer through a headache a little bit. Around a dozen times during the unwieldy White House news conference, also urging mothers not to give their infants the drug, known by the generic name acetaminophen. He also fueled long debunked claims that ingredients in vaccines or timing shots are close together could contribute to rising rates of autism in the U.S. without providing any medical evidence. But
and let's remember, Trump was the one that kept touting Operation Warp Speed, and he was the one behind a lot of this. So for him to change his stance, there are some serious statistics behind this as evidence. So his base was completely against Trump when it came to Operation Warp Speed and the jibby jab, and he was getting booed on stage. And although he was silent about it, because he realized his base was against it, he's never given a statement like this. So for him to kind of switch his perspective, I think is a huge shift.
But then, funnily enough, after they say, in the next paragraph, they say the rambling announcement, which appeared to rely on existing studies rather than significant new research. So it was relying on studies. You just said that they didn't provide any medical evidence. And then the next paragraph, you say it's relying on existing studies. Comes as the Make America Healthy Again movement has been pushing for answers on the causes of autism, which they're framing it as something bad for some reason.
Well, I was also watching Kim Iverson the other day, and it was very interesting. The countries that mandate jibby jabs and the countries that don't. A lot of European countries don't actually mandate jibby jabs. So we do have a lot of data on countries and populations that don't take it versus that do, countries that take the jibby jab and a Tylenol, countries that take the jibby jab and only a Tylenol. So it's an easy comparison they have in a lot of these studies. The thing is, with the countries that do mandate it is primarily the U.S. and poorer countries that the U.S. gives aid to. And as a stipulation for that aid, those poorer countries very often have to mandate a jibby jab. So the American companies like Pfizer and Moderna make a lot of money and profit from it.
So the diverse coalition of supporters of Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. includes several anti-vaccine activists who have long spread debunked claims that immunizations are responsible. Again, it hasn't been fully debunked, and there's more and more proof coming out from just this. And I think that's one of the ways that they're running scared from media outlets, etc., that have tried to spew and say that there is no link, there is no link. The fact that there have been studies made from long ago until now and new ones coming out, they keep trying to say it's debunked, but I wouldn't be so quick in disseminating that if you're a news outlet.
Well, the problem here is there have been all these studies, and people that were in the know about these studies, but all these Western societies in unison are trying to ignore them. Now that you have an American administration headed by RFK actually bringing these studies to the front, and now he's backed up by the President of the United States himself, this is giving massive media coverage worldwide, and now it's hard to deny it. And if they keep making up lies in the press, there is going to be lawsuits that I could see coming on the heels of this.
And it just, I mean, again, in my opinion, it just proves how scared they are that some truth might actually come out because they don't hold the ear of the presidency and they don't act as a propaganda machine for the presidency anymore. They act as a propaganda machine for old presidencies and old.
Well, and we also have to realize this is a massive industrial complex, a medical industrial complex. Countries like Canada and Australia have spent billions of dollars manufacturing mRNAs in their own country. And we have a story about that later. Also, Gavin Newsom, along with a couple other states, say they're no longer going to listen to the CDC, HHS, and RFK, that they're going to make their own group of recommendations for their populations. Obviously, they're siding with the vaccine companies themselves. Mm-hmm. So,
and it would be interesting to see, who pays who and who's received money from what source and lobbyists.
I'm all for liberals and liberal states mandating vaccines. Sure. If that's what they want to do, you're going to have a group and a population of U.S. residents. You're going to basically be able to compare and contrast with other states that didn't take the jibby jab. Mm-hmm. And that data is important.
And Rafa, who I hope you don't mind me saying, is an expectant father, asks, do you think, again, we're not medical people, no medical information, not scientists, etc. But he asks, do you think that applies only to Tylenol or to all paracetamol? Well, it seems like they did specify acetaminophen, which is the active ingredient in Tylenol, and most other paracetamol. I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I would say consult with what they release, but also consult with your own doctor for now.
Yeah, and
that is a sad kind of thing that we can't fully trust.
It is the active ingredient that you just stated, because I had seen the research and I watched RFK talk about this, and other countries that didn't take any type of Tylenol or thing with that active ingredient in it.
Acetaminophen.
I can't say it. That's why I'm not saying it.
I know, but
didn't have the same results that people in first world countries primarily that took the vaccines and the Tylenol had. That's the compare and contrast data that they were able to come to these conclusions with.
But I'd say, I guess, just wait until whatever is going to be released or has been released by the people that have been studying it. And then again, consult with your doctor if you trust them.
Okay, let's go into the next story.
Yes,
here.
but speaking of them losing grasp of some of their main propaganda outlets, CEOs of Reddit and Twitch called to testify to Congress on radicalization in the wake of Charlie Kirk assassination. The CEOs of several major online platforms have been invited to testify before Congress about the potential for radicalization on online forums following the assassination of conservative commentator Charlie Kirk. James Comer, chairman of the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee, invited the heads of Discord, Steam, Twitch, and Reddit to testify after authorities revealed that Tyler Robinson, the 22-year-old suspected of assassinating Kirk, was said to have been influenced by the dark corners of the internet.
Yeah, and these are the last remaining kind of leftist platforms, and I think
Blue Sky is missing.
Yeah, but it's fairly new and it's not very significant. Twitch and Reddit especially, including Steam on their chat forums as well. These are very leftist platforms, and once they get grilled by the government, and certain content creators are going to be called out here. I know Hassan Piker is absolutely petrified of this. He's been protected by Twitch over and over again. These conservative congressmen are going to now drill the CEO down of Twitch about Hassan Piker. I'm sure they're going to have clips, statements that he's made on his show. And I think the CEO is going to go back and kind of have to put some boundaries here, because he has called for violence on his show. And that's the line. There is free speech. Free speech ends when you have a direct call for violence.
Well, again, the restrictions to free speech regarding inciting violence are very narrow, and you have to meet a certain standard and threshold before it can be actually considered incitement to violence. It has to be actionable within the immediacy. It needs immediacy and be able to be actionable. That's
what I just said. They're going to call him out, and he has made those statements in the past.
Yes, but I'm saying I don't think they qualify, even though I hate it, they don't qualify.
He does qualify.
It doesn't qualify as incitement to violence.
It does qualify, because I've seen the things he's directly said for certain people.
The thing is, it has to be actionable.
I know.
In the moment.
It is actionable.
In the moment.
I understand that.
You have to be able to see the person and say, let's go get him. That's a call to violence.
Yeah, he has said that.
But he's still saying it online. He's not saying it in front of someone where he can get someone else to act upon that violence.
Why don't we watch Congress and see what happens there?
Yes.
And then we'll see what the CEOs actually do.
You're very fighty today. The Oversight Committee said it would examine the radicalization of online forum users, including instances of open incitement to commit politically motivated acts on specific platforms, according to a congressional press release. The politically motivated assassination of Charlie Kirk claimed the life of a husband, a father, and American patriot. In the wake of this tragedy and amid other acts of politically motivated violence, and we have seen multiple since just the past September 10th, Congress has a duty to oversee the online platforms that radicals have used to advance political violence, said Representative Comer, a Republican from Kentucky. FBI is currently investigating the involvement of a lot more than 20 users who participated in a Discord chat with Robinson before Kirk's shooting, according to FBI Director Kash Patel, who spoke in front of Senate Judiciary Committee on Tuesday. And again, I think it's more that the platforms have been kind of like a safe harbor for a lot of this thing to brew within their own platforms. And while they say that, oh yes, they have community guidelines, etc., those are only applied, number one, to one side, but number two, they've kind of turned a blind eye. I mean, I'm sure they're able to see how their platforms are being used, at least in the most extreme cases, and yet haven't acted upon that.
Yeah, and that's the thing. They have implemented these policies on conservative commentators and left-wing commentators, specifically Hassan Piker. And even the left points it out that Hassan Piker is allowed to say things even other leftists aren't able to say. So somehow he has got the golden boy status on Twitch.
And I think it's their cash cow.
And I think that's going to end coming up real soon here. I don't even think it is, because he must know somebody in there, because it's owned by Amazon. So Amazon's making a ton of money. He must have connections with inside of Twitch.
But they also allowed Destiny to stay on there for
But Destiny's not nearly as radical as the things Hassan Piker has said.
I think both of them.
They are both radical, I will say that. But Hassan Piker, you don't watch these.
No, but I've seen the worst examples of what he said.
Okay.
Moving on.
You're all for fighting today.
I'm not fighting. Should we talk about CBDCs?
Yeah, this was a big one. And I was talking to some friends of ours saying Europe was going to release CBDCs in December. Well, no, I was mistaken. And I'm sure we went over this article before. I just want to bring it up because they're now releasing them in October.
Or that's their target to do that in October. So from Cryptopolitan, only one of the few sources I could find, European Central Bank sets October 2025 target for digital euro launch. European Central Bank president says there are plans to introduce the digital euro by October 2025, so next month. Lagarde believes the U.S. pullback on digital dollar under Donald Trump gives Europe a golden opportunity to dominate. Despite concerns of privacy and freedom surrounding CBDCs, ECB president says it's critical and more relevant than ever.
Yeah, and the EU is in huge trouble. That statement that they just said there, that Trump is not going to join the CBDCs in the States with Europe, and he's going to probably introduce the stable coin and a lot more freedom, meaning he's going to keep the dollar and the stable coin and offer the stable coin to people within the EU, is going to give an alternative to the CBDC. The CBDC the EU is trying to implement, they want to force people into this thing, and so they have no other alternative but the CBDCs, which are programmable in a lot of different aspects within Europe. If there is another alternative within Europe, this will completely undermine these government CBDCs and they will collapse. They won't work. I think Europe is in a lot of trouble right now.
So the question was whether Europe had a unique opportunity to gain pioneer status with its digital euro after Donald Trump signed an executive order preventing U.S. Federal Reserve from creating a digital dollar. Lagarde.
And 1 second. And yes, he doesn't want a CBDC because that would be completely programmable and very authoritarian. He's offering a stable coin that offers a lot more freedom, so you can use it in conjunction with a dollar. The EU wants to do away with all other currencies other than their CBDC, which is programmable within the EU.
So Christine Lagarde, who is the European Central Bank president, said that they've been working on the digital euro for more than 5 years now, starting from her predecessor's time, and the plan now is to finalize the work by October 2025. She added that Europe will proceed with a plan to introduce a digital euro despite the U.S. changing its stance on CBDCs.
There was supposed to be no other competitors to this digital euro. The American CBDC was supposed to flow into the digital euro, basically making the EU the center of power. That is no longer happening, and I do not know what Europe is going to do. On top of that, they said they're going to be the first to market. No, they're not the first to market. Vietnam is trying to do this, and they had to freeze 86 million bank accounts because people do not want to adopt a digital ID because they do not want to adopt digital currency.
And biometrics.
And biometrics, yeah.
Or they haven't given their biometrics, so they're not able to access their bank accounts, which now rely on their biometrics.
And if something happens in the EU where people aren't willing to comply with this, the EU is going to be in serious trouble here, especially if they start adopting American currencies.
So whether Europe adopts a CBDC depends on other stakeholders, which are the European Parliament, European Commission, and European Council. Until these stakeholders vote and decide on the matter, the digital euro will remain an experimental idea.
And I will say this, we've said over the last couple of weeks that the UK and France are on the verge of financial collapse. Both economic ministers in those countries have said they may need a bailout from the IMF or the EU or both. Only France can get a bailout from the EU. The UK can only get a bailout from the IMF. That being said, they're too big to collapse. And I think this is working in conjunction with these digital currencies, because if France collapses, that's going to create a domino effect in the EU of other economies collapsing, of the EU dollar itself collapsing. And then that's how they can force people into the CBDC.
And Lagarde is pushing to introduce the digital euro, which she considers very important for the continent. In her response, she noted that Europe needs the digital euro to function at the wholesale and retail levels. So
they don't.
Regular people.
They've been functioning for decades without this. They do not need this. The US dollar is the world currency. They can use that. They can also use the yen. They can also use the EU. There's no purpose for a digital currency other than authoritarian control from the government itself. And the EU has multiple layers of governments. They have like the countries themselves that have their presidents and their prime ministers. And then they have a whole nother bureaucracy of the EU. And then they have the UN as well. The UN wants to start taxing world citizens. They may do it through a digital currency or the EU digital currency. There's so many layers of bureaucracy within the European Union. This is absolutely insane.
And she said, I think it's critically important, and for the agnostics or the skeptics, it now seems more relevant and more imperative than ever before, both on the wholesale and on the retail level, because they can see it, the control flooding out of their hands.
Well, all the major economies have kind of pulled out of the EU and London banking systems. This is part of the reason Putin was put into power in Russia. Now Putin has a completely separate type of economy that's not influenced by the global economy. Xi was put into power in China in order to break free of the London banking system. And that's why they completely remapped the Chinese banking system at that time. And now with Trump coming into office in 2016, laying down the first foundation, they are now breaking free of the London banking system as well. So what are they going to do going forward? I don't know.
Well, going a little bit back to Trump's announcement today, and RFK Jr.'s announcement today, in Canada, they're doing the exact opposite. And hopefully YouTube doesn't get mad about this. But once again, we are streaming on X and RUMBLE as well, like all at the same time. We will be testing some other platforms so to try to just maximize our reach now. So we'll make those announcements later. But Industry Minister from Rebel News, if you don't follow them, go follow them. They're an independent media source from Canada. Industry Minister Melanie Joly takes a jab at countries that turn their back to science, clearly one specifically, as she joins Moderna's CEO in announcing the company has made its first doses of its COVID mRNA vaccine at its facility in Laval, Quebec.
Yeah, every major investment the Canadian government is making is collapsing beneath their feet. They made a huge hundreds of billions of dollars into an EV plant. That collapsed. It's now completely bankrupt and shut down. They invested billions of dollars into the jibby jabs, which people aren't even taking in Canada. They invested another billion, even more billions of dollars in actually making the manufacturing plant for future jibby jabs in Canada. And nobody seems to be wanting to take these. So these were bad investments. And that's why you're seeing the Canadian economy collapse.
And they don't want to accept that. Let's see her announce it. So proudly behind the Moderna Government of Canada podium. If that doesn't scare you if you're in Canada, you probably should.
We're sending a strong message today. Canada's ready. We're ready to produce here at home. We're ready to protect our people, and we're ready to lead on the global stage. And while some countries turn their backs to science, Canada will invest in and believe in science.
Was it?
Because science.
She'll invest in and believe in science. The science is coming out in mass against mRNA, specifically jibby jabs. And there was more stuff that just came out with HHS, the CDC, RFK Jr. just released these. Trump talked about them. And the fact that she's saying they're going to follow science, they're following a science the rest of the world just isn't following.
But I just want to replay what she said there at the end.
Because science saves lives.
Science saves lives, and they believe in science, even though the science has now proven, once it was being able to really be released by governments that now want to fully put the truth out there instead of propaganda, that it's a very different news.
They're in big trouble, because if there's not another pandemic in the next 5 to 10 years, which historically there shouldn't be, but if there isn't one, this facility they built in Canada is billions of dollars down the drain again for another major project. And they're going to release the Canadian budget on November 4th, almost a year overdue. And they're saying it's going to probably be $100 billion over budget, meaning they don't collect taxes for that money, is going to mean mass inflation. And they're saying it's a once in a generation investment in Canada. So far, everything this government has invested in has absolutely collapsed. I don't trust them with that kind of investment. They need to open Canada up to private industry, private mining industries, lumber industries. They have the natural resources. The Canadian government doesn't need to do it themselves. They can have private industry do it for them.
However, that private industry shouldn't just come from the CCP, as most of the Canada's mining industry right now is controlled. Even though it says it's Canadian, it's actually controlled by members of the CCP. But the last thing I wanted to say is she said that they're going to invest in science and invest in this project. However, they might want to also invest in the collapsing healthcare system that they have, just to maybe be sure and be aware that of the consequences that this might have and the impacts it might have on the already strained Canadian healthcare industry.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is not free, by the way.
And I will say, yeah, I used to work in the mining industry, so I do know, and that's when I kind of got an education on what was going on in Canada with Canadian mining industry. 70% of mining headquarters are based in Canada, specifically most of them in Vancouver or Ontario. The majority of that 70% is owned by the Chinese government. They just keep that Canadian front on it so they can get contracts in other places around the world.
Do you want to continue on Canada?
Yeah, I had a lot of Canadian stuff. This was a good one.
The Canadian Anti-Hate Network's Evan Balgord. If you don't know what the Anti-Hate Network is, it's basically just the way they can target and legislate in some cases due to the evidence that they provide against people that speak the truth and think like normal people.
It's legislation against free speech. Canada does not have free speech because of these hate speech laws and because of specialty groups in Canada, which get specialty privileges that you can't say anything against.
Well, Evan Balgord says the Canadian government should control social media algorithms. They already kind of tried to do with the news. News from outlets that are not Canadian is not allowed on Facebook, Instagram, etc. already. Let's see what he says.
But what we can do is, you know, if we put in this rules against hate content, right, we can get our allies to follow suit. We're already kind of in conversations with the UK, Australia, a few other places, kind of talking about coordinating our approach to Facebook and other social media companies. So if enough countries come forward with these kind of rules and regulations, Facebook will have to apply them more broadly. Like they'll have to invent, like they have the ability to do this, right? I mean, they're a very smart company, but they'll have to like turn on that kind of content moderation and the algorithms and figure out, they have to make that system work when there's a few countries that are requiring it of them, right? I'm also pushing, I doubt it'll make it into the government's bill, but I think that, you know, it's something we have to seriously consider, is if they do not pay their fines, if they do not follow the laws as written by our country, at what point do we turn the tap off on them, right? And just how difficult is that going to be to do politically? Can we allow this giant company that doesn't follow our laws to operate in our country if they're doing so in like a discriminatory manner? Do we have the stomach to shut them down? One thing that's also not being
well, 1 second. And they are conceding a ton of ground to the United States. Rather than making alternative platforms, they think they're going to legislate the United States. Donald Trump, JD Vance aren't going to have that. And they're already starting to stand up to these fines. As soon as these tariff deals are put ink to paper, you're going to really see the United States lock down on the EU and Canada for trying to make these unjust laws.
But also, in the end, they want to be able to control and regulate the U.S. That's what's being implied here. Yeah. And U.S. companies, and the U.S. I don't think is going to.
Well, and there's another wrinkle to this, because Elon Musk is going to release a phone pretty soon. There is a ton of evidence coming out. He's bought other satellite companies other than just Starlink. This phone is going to come out under the Tesla name. It's a direct to satellite a direct to satellite phone. So it's going to be extremely hard to censor these specific phones in these countries.
Being discussed nearly enough in the context of this is, we're talking about the big platforms. So that's the most important thing to talk about. It is, because that's where hate reaches everyday normal people, right? Thanks in part to things like Facebook's algorithm. But what about the smaller platforms that are specifically designed to host hate speech, by which I mean DLive, BitChute, Gab, and there's a myriad of other smaller ones, right?
It's funny, he's not mentioning Discord, he's not mentioning Reddit, he's not mentioning the ones where, that the US is actually investigating.
Well, and this is why
because that's where they communicate.
Hate speech laws are so dangerous, because the government gets to dictate what is hate speech, what views are acceptable, what's unacceptable. In Canada, it's unacceptable to the government to be conservative, and that's why you see so much censorship on the conservative side from the Canadian government itself.
Yes, there is nothing in the rule book that actually specifies what hate is, and it is something that each government can decide what turns to hate and what isn't. And one thing these idiots never consider is what happens if the other side gets on board. I mean, power will never be let go, and if it's already legislated in, then what says that they won't deem everything you say, like your pronouns and your multiple genders, as hate speech as well, and then they're going to go persecute you? They never think about that.
Right. These companies, why would we have any faith that they're going to either pay our fines or follow our rules or anything like that? They're not going to, right? So we need to be talking about things like international criminal sanctions for people who are purposely flaunting our law, and
this is the new liberal talking points. They want international citizens, international governing bodies. They want to have the UN specifically is trying to implement a tax on every person within the entire globe, called a world citizen tax, that they want the governments to charge their citizens and then give those proceeds to the UN because they're struggling for money. That's absolutely ridiculous. We don't need another layer of bureaucracy
or taxes.
Yeah. Or sovereignty.
Prohibiting them from importing hate propaganda into Canada, by which I mean blocking the IP address of their site from Canadian internet companies, right?
But then again, once again, what is hate? What does hate mean? And the ones that think they can determine it right now are them and the ruling party in power. But again, if the other side gets in, or even someone that they would consider worse, what says that they will allow all of that? Then that's not hate anymore, and everything that they had been espousing is. I mean, I wouldn't want a conservative government to continue with the grasp of power and government, but
they've already thought about that. Even if a conservative government comes in, they're trying to make international legislative bodies like the EU, like the UN. They want international bodies that will be permanently liberalized to dictate over conservatives or anybody with a different opinion than them. Climate change, it's 100% real, and we better do whatever they say. That's what they want.
And pay whatever sanctions and fees they want us to pay in order to combat it, even though they don't show anything changing or any examples of how it would work.
Liberalism is becoming a suicide cult, period.
A death cult, yeah. We can't say the
I just did.
Yes, but let me just see if we're still on. Okay, YouTube doesn't seem to be angry at us yet. But,
yeah. Okay.
Speaking, we're still staying on Canada. Canada officially recognizes the state of Palestine.
Yeah, and this is interesting because Mark Carney said he was going to put this through Parliament. It was going to be voted upon, and then he would sign it, and he didn't do any of that. He signed this like a dictator, even though it was voted down just a few months ago within Canada. So now he's doing a fake, go back to that picture. He's doing a fake executive order here. They don't actually have executive orders in Canada, but it was so effective for Donald Trump, he said he would start doing photo shoots like this.
And it's not the first time he does this.
No.
He did this right when he came into power, when he became prime minister for a second time.
And this does have big implications. People don't seem to think it has implications, but a lot of countries around the world have just recognized Palestine for the first time. So now they can accept refugees and migrants from these countries. So when they clear out Palestine or clear out that region because of the war that's going on, they're going to send them to the UK. They're going to send them to Canada. And these are people coming from a war-torn country that are radicalized and somewhat violent, coming to a country that has a lot of people from Israel and other Jewish people. So it's going to cause a conflict within the country accepting these immigrants.
Because they can't find any other new conflicts to make. I mean, they can, but... So from CNN World, Britain, Canada, and Australia formally recognize a Palestinian state, deepening Israel's isolation.
And this is not going to work well for Canada. The United States is drawing closer with Israel right now. So if they think this is going to help them in a tariff deal, if they wanted to recognize Palestine, they should have waited to after the tariff deal was done. Donald Trump directly commented on this and said this is absolutely ridiculous.
So Britain, Canada, and Australia announced formal recognition of the state of Palestine on Sunday in an attempt to pile pressure on Israel as it presses on with its campaign in Gaza despite international outrage. The three all-strong allies of Israel for decades also expressed deep frustration at the lack of progress towards a two-state solution. Later on Sunday, Portugal announced it too had formally recognized the Palestinian state, adding that a two-state solution was the only path to a just and lasting peace.
Yeah, and I'm not a big fan of Netanyahu himself. I have nothing against Israel, although I do think countries should put their own countries first. And these trillions of dollars the United States is giving Israel, I'm not necessarily for that. Israel should fund their own war campaigns. That being said, this is not a good idea to let Palestinians into these countries. This is going to end very badly for these countries that have done this, especially if they allow refugee status to be put on these people.
And we've already seen in Canada what having refugee status actually gets you and gives you, and it is way more money than any actual Canadian makes in a year even.
And we've seen what happened in Britain. They gave Afghanis refugee status, and then they secretly funneled them in through black flights in the middle of the night, and this came out in a huge scandal years later, and people didn't know people from war-torn countries were in here that were kind of radicalized, and it caused a problem within Britain.
And France and several other countries are expected to follow suit at the United Nations General Assembly this week, deepening Israel's isolation and putting them at odds with Israel's key partner, the U.S.
Yeah, and one country that didn't recognize Palestine actually was Italy and Giorgia Meloni, and that caused massive protests within the country. So a lot of these countries are infiltrated by radicalists like Canada, so they're just going to bend the knee because they don't want any protests within their own country.
And yes, for Marina, fall clashes in Italy after Prime Minister Meloni rejects Palestine recognition. Italy saw major protests after PM Meloni said no to recognizing a Palestinian state, breaking with several Western allies. Pro-Palestinian dock workers blocked access to key ports to stop weapons from being shipped to Israel, effectively halting logistics in several areas. In Milan, chaos hit the streets as riot police clashed with demonstrators near the central station, using tear gas to control the crowds.
And let's watch the video there.
Okay. Protests are part of a broader European wave calling for a ceasefire and statehood. And we also saw a bunch of stuff happening in France the last week.
And this isn't France, this is Italy, so it's usually not this violent, and this is crazy.
And if you want to note, what color are most of them wearing? And what flags, other than the Palestinian one, can we see in the video?
I don't know, what is it?
Antifa.
Oh, okay.
Which have been spokespeople and propagandists and actors for the cause as well. They have taken up this cause, as they have with many others.
And
also the fact that the U.S. has now stated that Antifa is terror-based organization. What does this mean for its relations with other countries that have very known cells and networks of Antifa working within them and protesting also within them, like Germany, Italy, France?
And I would like to see peace in the Middle East like these other countries, but recognizing Palestine as a state is not going to do that. I don't think this was a good idea for these individual countries because you're going to see refugees flood in here into the middle of the night, and it's going to cause tension within your own country. Also, on top of that, oh God, there was something else I was going to say. We have we have talked now in the past, because the main country supporting Israel is the United States. And it does seem like they're trying to implement end time prophecy with the sacrifice of the red heifer and a lot of other things that they're currently trying to do right now. So it doesn't make sense why they're not negotiating peace, why Israel is at war with 7 different groups right now, 4 of them being countries, 3 more of those being individual non-state groups. Why are they starting so many wars? And why are they sacrificing the red heifer and doing a lot of these other end time prophecies? It's a little bit crazy.
I do agree. Speaking about that is a little bit crazy. But from the BBC, again, clashes break out as Italians strike demanding
It's not
action
crazy because
over
there
Gaza.
are Christians and Israelis that want end time prophecy to come true, and they try to push it forward.
Even our dog is upset with you that you're bringing forth
End time
that
prophecy.
talking point.
End time prophecy.
Hey, sorry about
Okay, let's go to the next article.
that. Okay. From the food professor, we do not ship wheat in bags to Mexico. These Trudeau-era photo ops need to stop, and the media start calling them out for what they are, empty stunts that make them look foolish. Okay. And there's actually an article that comes alongside with this in case you'd have no idea what we're talking about. Well,
The dog's not listening to me.
no. Well, you chase the dog around.
Okay.
Okay, so from the Canadian grocer, the food
no,
professor.
go back to that.
Well, it's the same thing. This is a continuation as an article. From whiskey dumps to wheat bags in Mexico, Canada's food politics gets silly when politicians trade photo ops. Instead of facts, they cheapen Canada's reputation as modern agri-food powerhouse and deepen our national food illiteracy. From Sylvian Charlebois.
The reason they use food propaganda in Canada so much is food prices in Canada are so overpriced and so taxed by the government. Let me tell you, I've never been to a country in the world where food costs more than it does in Canada. Mm-hmm. It's a very emotional subject for Canadians. A lot of Canadians can't afford to eat. Food banks are at all-time lows as far as food because so many people are going to these food banks.
And especially like places like Vancouver, where we lived for about 13 years, it was getting crazy towards the end, but it has been that way for a long time. And Canadians have just kind of come to accept it in a way. They try to demand change, but nothing happens. In recent weeks, we have witnessed politicians lean on powerful visuals to make their case on food and trade, but these staged moments rarely serve the public interest. Worse, they often deepen food illiteracy in a country where understanding how our system works is already fragile. Take Ontario Premier Doug Ford's stunt, upset with Diageo's decision to close its bottling plant in Ontario, and we spoke about this and showed the video. He theatrically dumped a bottle of Crown Royal and urged Ontarians to boycott the brand. What he didn't mention is that the bottle in question was made in Manitoba and bottled in Quebec by unionized Canadian workers, jobs unaffected by the Ontario closure. The Windsor facility mainly serviced the U.S. market, and Diageo's decision was years in the making. Ironically, the boycott risks punishing Canadian workers who will continue producing Crown Royal for Canadians. And for future investors, the message is chilling. Why put capital into Ontario if a government will
let's
trash?
Go to the Mexican one.
Okay. The federal stage brought us another head-scratcher during a trade visit to Mexico. Prime Minister Mark Carney, and this was this past week, posed with bags of Canadian wheat stamped with a maple leaf. The problem? Canada doesn't export wheat in bags. We are amongst the most efficient bulk grain exporters in the world, shipping millions of tons through rail networks and ocean vessels designed for efficiency, safety, and traceability. Bagged wheat is a relic of less mechanized economies. For Canada to present itself in this way trivializes our status as a modern agri-food powerhouse. Beyond being misleading, the image suggests to global partners that our system is less advanced than it truly is, a dangerous misinterpretation for a nation that depends on its reputation as much as price. This matters because perception influences policy. Just this week, polls showed Canadian support cutting tariffs off on Chinese electric vehicles to protect canola growers facing retaliatory barriers in China.
And Canada is being taxed now to the tits through a tariff through the United States, which they were doing to the United States for decades. The United States just wasn't doing it back. They finally are. So good on the U.S. for doing that, number one. Number two, they look extremely weak, and now China is tariffing them as well. It seems like they would be able to figure this out and at least have one friend, but rather than cut a deal, they're getting tariffed by everybody because they've been tariffing other countries for decades. And people are starting to figure out the scheme that Canada was doing to them. Tariff other countries and don't have them tariff you in return. The gig's up, and governments around the world know what Canada is all about.
But also during that visit from Prime Minister Carney to Mexico, I am Mexican as well, and we live in Mexico, and I spoke about this on my Spanish show, but I'll speak about it quickly here. Prime Minister Mark Carney did seem to want to make a lot of photo ops and a lot of talk about a trade deal or about the USMCA with Mexico. However, it has come out in graphs how much Canada actually exports and imports from Mexico, and it only exports about 1% to Mexico and about 20-something% from Mexico, or 6 or something% depending on how you're looking at it with the USMCA. But it was mostly all in an act and to get photo ops instead of actually working in what Canadians need, which is a trade deal with the US that actually works for
Mark
Canadians,
Carney's,
which
she's trying to say
won't.
Mark Carney has traveled around the world since he's been elected, primarily staying out of Canada, pretending like he's getting deals all around the world, and nothing's actually coming to paper. The Canadian economy is collapsing. Its biggest trade partner always has and always will be the United States. He needs to man up and get a trade deal with the United States, but instead he wants to run another election so he can try to get a majority government. In order to run that election, he needs to make Orange Man bad, because that's the only thing he has.
But also from Canada, and speaking about food, and from Rebel News, 50 million hopped away. Ottawa paid $6.25 million per job to push crickets on Canadians. Aspire Food Group received a $50 million handout, creating only 8 jobs before receivership.
That's 8. 8, not 80, not 800, 8 jobs.
And again, this is from Rebel News. If you don't follow them, go follow them. But Aspire Food Group, London, Ontario's success story is anything but. 50 million of your money was funneled into a company whose big idea was crickets for dinner. Again, I am a Mexican when we do eat crickets here in Mexico, but I understand everybody else's preoccupations with this around the world. Ottawa granted Aspire an 8.5 million repayable contribution. Farm Credit Canada added 37.5 million loan in 2022 with another 4 million in 2024. No one wanted to eat bugs despite the government's attempts to convince us they were the future of
Well,
dinner.
and this was another thing Canada invested in, and it collapsed. Its EV manufacturing plant collapsed, its battery plant collapsed, its cricket farms collapsed. It's now trying to build modular homes in a very cold and weather-based country, which modular homes shouldn't be built in. Canada needs to get out of the way and let private industry in. They have so much bureaucracy and legislation, it keeps private industry out. The government wants to try to create a monopoly, so it's at the center of everything, and it's going to collapse the economy in Canada. I think that's what they want. They want to force people into a digital currency, digital ID. They want them to live in pods, eat bugs, and own nothing.
And at the same time, apparently, did you know Trudeau made it legal for the media to lie to you? We have spoken a lot about how state-sponsored media works in Canada, but apparently the Liberals manipulate your thoughts, and the CBC is the biggest liar. Propaganda is 100% paid for and 100% pushed by all major media outlets without fear of prosecution.
And the Canadian government invests billions of dollars into their propaganda arm, and they legalized lying to the Canadian public now. Let's go into this.
It's not a video, it's just a photo. So from Justice Louis' website, so this is spreading false news. It says 181, everyone who willfully publishes a statement, tale, or news that he knows is false and that causes likely to cause injury or mischief to the public interest is guilty of it's kind of hard to read. It's guilty of an indictable offense and liable to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 2 years.
And that used to be the law in Canada.
2022.
And this is the new law.
From 1981, it was repealed back from 2019.
Yeah, and absolutely insane what Canada is doing on almost every level. We used to live in Canada. It upsets me. This is why I follow Canadian politics so much. They are tip of the spear when it comes to a lot of these absolutely catastrophic liberal policies.
But yes, in Canada, there is no law that explicitly prohibits the government from engaging in propaganda directed at its own people. Funny that. Do you want to move to Are You on Bailey and Just X?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're gonna.
So YouTube, goodbye.
So we're gonna head over to RUMBLE as well as X, which is our first time broadcasting on X.
Yes.
Yeah, we'd like to end the show over there with the last few stories because we need alternative platforms in case censorship becomes a thing on YouTube again.
And also because there are certain things we are not allowed to say on YouTube, even though you said a bunch of them today.
Yeah.
So we'll see you over there at Nat and The Guy on X, and on Rumble, on RUMBLE, it's our same username.
Maybe I'll log into the X today.
I logged into the X.
Oh, you are? Okay, I'll log into
I have the chat. I just have to grab the Rumble chat.